Sure. Thanks. Hi, everyone. First, I will start off with an apology that I am not him. If you looked at the agenda and expecting him, I used to be the number 2 Rob Lowe. If you Googled Rob Lowe, because obviously I have slightly narcissistic tendencies, so I have done that. And I was quite happy being number 2 Rob Lowe, because I'm not as rich or successful or good looking as he is, unfortunately. But then this guy, he was like a really successful graphic artist. He had one of those cool graphic artist names like Banksy or something, and then he kind of got a bit older and decided he wanted to be more mature. Turns out his name is Rob Lowe. So he came out as Rob Lowe, basically, and now he's the second best Rob Lowe, and I'm relegated to number 3 Rob Lowe. You can find me around page 26 of Google somewhere, unfortunately, and I just get surrounded with an air of disappointment whenever I check into a hotel or turn up to a dinner reservation, basically. But, you know, it's character building. Anyway, that's not my actual current name in some ways. I'm actually known as Chairman Wiley Dolphin on our new experience called Lego Life. I chose that name because I actually don't like dolphins. I have a slight aversion towards dolphins, but that's a story for another time. So I'm here to talk about Lego Life. It's one of the major initiatives that Lego has done in the last year or so, trying to modernize the way we communicate with kids. And it started off around 3 years ago as a business case. Now, a lot of the words that you guys probably hear a lot is around personalization, around data, around creating a one-to-one relationship with your consumers, improving the consumer lifetime value of those interested in your brand. And this was a business case essentially built around those things. And also with another part of it kind of creating a digital ecosystem both for the users that links together, and also for us at Lego, so that we found that we were basically creating a lot of the same digital things in different departments of the organization because we were quite siloed. So we're going to do something that brings all of this together into one initiative. And although that sounds really exciting for a business with all those amazing buzzwords in, when you say it to a child, we're going to increase your consumer lifetime value, they're like, oh, all right. So then the next kind of job is, okay, well, what are we actually going to make for kids? Because essentially that is our job, is to get kids kind of excited. We have a mission and an aspiration at Lego. Our mission is to inspire and develop the builders of tomorrow, and our aspiration is to reach 300 million kids with Lego Play by the year 2032, which also coincides with our 100th anniversary. So this business case was one of the major initiatives that was created to try and do that. So then we thought, okay, well, what is this going to actually mean for kids? How is this going to kind of exist, if you like? So there were 2 core things that we wanted to focus on. Creativity, and in particular with Lego, creativity means the joy of building and the pride of creation. That is the same now as it was 30, 40 years ago. Kids still have that. And this is where I'm going to ask you to look at your little bags. If you don't have a little bag, then turn around. I think Max can provide a little bag for you. But if you want to, this is supposed to be all the tools you need to make a duck. So if you guys want to spend 30 seconds making a duck, if you are advanced builders, try doing it without opening the bag. But I wouldn't recommend, I can't do that, and I've been working at Lego 4 years, so. And Troy, you don't count because you work at Lego and you've probably done this a million times before already. Okay, how are the ducks coming along? Everybody hold up your duck. So this is my duck, and I'm not saying this is the right duck, but it is. No, I'm joking. And there's probably a lot of different ducks around the room. Everyone has made something slightly different. There's probably a few that are similar, yeah. But I'm hoping that in some small way you feel slightly proud of what you've made. Some of them look pretty bad, but it's okay. But that's the kind of feeling that's amplified by 10, 20 when you're a kid and you have many more bricks to make. So this feeling of pride of creation is something that when you get to a slightly older age, the age of 8, 9 years old, is something you want to share more than just with your family or those in close proximity to you. It's something we know from testing and talking to kids all the time, is that they suddenly have this urge when they get a bit older to want to share with a broader audience. So we decided that we wanted to make something that allows kids to share what they've built with a much broader kind of forum of Lego fans. So once we've done that, once you want something that connects these kids around the world together to amplify this pride of creation, then you suddenly realize there's a reason why no one's created a social network for 9, 10-year-olds before. It's because the social network that's primarily used by that younger audience is YouTube, and as a content consumption platform for kids, it's second to none, and the kids can spend hours and hours just watching videos on there, and it's one of our primary tools that we have in our communication toolbox. But if you go to the comment section on YouTube, it's a horrible, horrible place. And you go in there, and it's just not the kind of place that a 9, 10-year-old should be engaging with. So we decided, okay, we think, we currently reach around 100 million kids around the world. 50 million of them are kind of medium to high affinity Lego kids. We think we have enough of an audience to create something here that embraces creativity and allows them to share that. And we also need to make it super safe. So the parents need to be involved. We need to make sure it's absolutely triple locked in terms of safety so that it cannot kind of be compromised in any way. So we did a lot of research into this, and some of you may know about GDPR, which is coming next year, the General Data something, which is going to have a lot of rules around what you can do with data, both for adults and children in Europe. And there's also COPPA that already exists in the US, which is going to have already has similar guidelines. And so in order for kids to be able to share a picture of their face with their build, they need to go through something called verified parental consent, which means that a parent has to prove that they are an adult and then give the consent for the child to do it, because it's considered personal information, a child's face, obviously. So we did a test with some adults, and we said to them, okay, one way you can prove you're an adult is by giving us your credit card information so we know you're over 18. Would you be okay giving us your credit card information when you sign up your kids to Lego Life for a full account so they can share their creations? And they're like, oh, I don't know about that. I'm not happy sharing that level of personal information, even with you, Lego, with the trusted brand that you've got. So then we asked some further questions with them and with some other groups. We're like, okay, well, what if the app was $3 and you had to pay for it? And they were like, yeah, well, actually, I really like the look of the app. It's really great. Yeah, I'd pay $3. How would you pay that $3? Probably with my card. And then you're kind of like, you get into this deep area of psychology around the use of that thing, the sharing of data versus what has that thing actually been made for. And it's actually fascinating that they were willing to pay for it, but they weren't willing to use their data and with zero cost to prove that they're an adult. So we actually decided to pivot slightly and move away and keep the kids completely anonymous in the experience. So the kids now, they can't share a picture of themselves, but what they can do is they can put a cool minifigure thing over their face. So they can't show basically anything that has their real name or their personal, and then when we put videos in later on next year, they won't be able to have their voice in it either. And we thought, oh, this is going to be terrible, there's constraints, kids aren't going to like it. But you forget that when you're designing something for kids, you automatically, your kind of heuristic bias inside is like, I want to design something like Facebook or Instagram that already exists. Whereas kids, in the most part, haven't experienced that before. So you start to realize that with the whole username thing at the beginning, where you can generate your own kind of anonymous username, we thought kids would hate that, but they actually will love it because it does it automatically, and they're normally quite fun and interesting, and it's kind of it's simple for them. So they actually really enjoyed it. We enabled emoji commenting rather than text commenting for user-generated content, because we didn't want kids to be upset by getting negative feedback too much from other kids. So basically, the emoji commenting made it much, much quicker and instant. And we made this little Lego emoji keyboard, which was really cool. And essentially, it meant that there wasn't the possibility for things to be taken out of context, because what we want to do is encourage kids to build and not have this kind of negative feedback loop that you see on other social media. We introduced kind of a very basic form of tagging, but we moved it away from hashtagging and moved it towards kind of visual tagging with these images around, I'm into animals, or I'm into Ninjago, I'm into other kind of interests and stuff like that. So we started introducing some elements of social networking to kids, what's good about it, and then kind of protected them from some of the more negative sides of it as well at the same time, and tried to avoid some of the things that are more designed around adults. And the problem is that Lego is a company that is traditionally amazing at spending 2 to 3 years creating an amazing box of bricks that end up on a shelf, with a great building experience attached to those. What we're not so good at is creating something that isn't very good or has potential, and then improving it over a period of time. We've had a number of high-profile digital initiatives in the last few years, and we've got a number of high-profile failures in the last few years. So like Lego Universe was a big online multiplayer game that we took exactly the same approach as we do to the physical product, which was we spent 3 years trying to make it perfect. It was delayed by like 1.5 years, and then when it came out, the business model was completely out of date. The product itself wasn't as good as it should have been, and surprisingly, hardly any kids actually played it. And we've done that several times in the past. So with this project, we insisted that I almost demanded the right to release something that wasn't finished yet. We actually changed the business case to allow us to release a beta version in the UK in September last year. We kind of had to ask for the permission to fail. And I know everyone talks about permission to fail, all that kind of stuff, but you need to, you can't underestimate how much you need to continually give that message, particularly to senior management, around this means that you can't tell us that we're failing because we don't have 1 million downloads after 1 week, because this is going to take a while to improve. We actually changed a lot of the ways we work internally. We set ourselves up. We were going to do it externally because we didn't feel we had the competencies, but then we realized that we actually do have them. We're just set up in completely the wrong way. We had the right developers. We moved it from developing in Unity to native coding. Unity is a very graphically rich tool that's used for like 3D games and stuff on mobile, but it wasn't the right thing for a social network. So we moved it to do it natively in iOS and Android. It meant that we had to double the development workload, basically, but it meant the app runs quicker and faster and it's easier to update, and much more is in the back end, so you don't have to update the app every single time we want to push out something new. So all these changes, they cost quite a lot for us, but they were the right things to do at the beginning to set ourselves up for continuous improvement throughout the whole period, rather than wait until it was perfect and then it would be out of date by then. And then we had to really kind of like sell it to so many people. Lego, in terms of, it's a very strong marketing company in a traditional marketing sense, and a lot of those people are very keen to try out new forms of marketing, but you really need to explain to them why it isn't going to have one-to-one chat at the beginning, or video UGC at the beginning, etc. And you have to do this kind of tour, basically, of all the different markets and marketing groups and product groups within the organization, explaining to them that they need to support it, even though it's a bit crap at the beginning. Sorry, and that's kind of what we did, basically. We also went to Apple and Google, and we had a very good relationship with Apple that was built something like in the past from our digital games that we've done with them. But they basically, what happened was we took the code of the beta version to them, and then we kind of curled up a little ball on the floor and let Apple just kick us for about a day and telling us how terrible it was. And they said the core of your loop is great. Creating a social network built around Lego creations for kids under 13 is something that doesn't really exist and will be great. But these are all the things you've done wrong. Like your font reviews isn't good for dyslexic kids, so you've already lost 10% of your audience. You have 3 different versions of the back button. You have 4 different versions of the submit UGC button. There's no consistency in your DIY style that you've chosen to use. So we were like, thanks, that's great. You can stop kicking us now. But then we actually went and implemented about 80% of those changes. And then they featured us at launch, which meant we did get the 1 million downloads when we put it out globally in January. Which was great. And we also did a big PR kind of extravaganza at the same time, where did like interviews with Parental press and tech press and talked about this great new social network. And I'm going to try and play a video now that kind of shows all the coverage that we got, and hopefully it will work if we can switch. So it's kind of a great sizzle reel and everything. And we're like, oh yeah, we had a great launch. We drove tons of downloads, particularly on Apple, and Google featured it in a smaller degree as well. But we kind of made the mistake that we now realize that we were trying to avoid, which is with Apple, you have to balance off the fact that they will only really feature stuff if it's new or if it has a major update or a change to it. And Apple featuring, from a marketing perspective, is beyond any kind of TV campaign, any kind of universal app download campaign that you can think of. It's like it will drive way more downloads than anything else. So you then think, okay, we're not quite ready yet, but Apple want to feature it, so we did, and then I'd say a good 90% of those kids that downloaded it, they didn't come back because the app wasn't ready yet. So we had a big bucket with a big hole in it, basically, and we poured tons of sand on the top and loads of sand came out the bottom. So we were like, okay, what can we do? So from January through until, well, now pretty much, we've spent the whole time improving the app bit by bit, basically, and taking the way we develop it into a completely different way. But for us, this is one of the biggest learnings. It's so tempting to fall into that thing. If we've finished it, we've made it, now I want to talk about it to everybody. Now I want it to be featured on the biggest storefront there is in the digital space. But it was, even though we come out of the beta period, it still wasn't ready yet. And that was a big learning for me. I think this is really important as well. So I've stood up in front of lots of internal groups at Lego, a bit like this, and sold the vision of Lego Life. We're going to have Batman in there talking to the kids one-to-one. That does happen in the experience. We're talking about the fact that in the future we're going to be linking it to the physical products much more tightly and all this stuff. So you have to sell a vision in order to get the financial backing that you need to start something like this. But then you also need to tell them that the first version do is not going to be very good. So there's kind of like, there's this real balance between selling it into the senior management, but then also being pragmatic and realistic about what you're going to deliver. We've run into the same thing several times. Recently we launched Lego Boost, which is this coding robot product, which is an awesome product. But the building instructions are not in a physical form. They're only available on an iPad. And we only created it for the top-end iPads and Android tablets. So there was like 30% of tablet owners couldn't actually run it, and it doesn't even work on a phone. And mobile usage is going way towards phone and much less towards tablet. So we actually made one of the same mistakes that we've made in the past again. So it's up to us to inform the organisation around trying not to just repeat these kind of things. This is like, however think you're ready to scale, it's impossible. We've reached like 27 markets now with Lego Life, and we're looking at China next year, which is interesting given the route to market digital there is, you essentially have to partner up with one of the big boys to get there. So that's what we were looking to do. But the two main areas where we had issues scaling were in moderation, because every image that goes up is moderated initially by AI, and then if it gets passed by the AI, then a human pair of eyes look at it. And then when we had some real spikes in activity, either marketing related or launching a new market, our moderation fell back. We were trying to have a 10-minute turnaround in moderation, and in some cases it was 4 hours, 5 hours. And obviously a kid is not going to be playing with the app for 4 hours, 5 hours. So, we have notifications, bringing them back in. The other thing was the Amazon Web Services that we use for a lot of the cloud technology. You pay with them what you think you're going to use, and then if it falls down, then you have to upgrade it, and it fell down basically right at the beginning. Now we've upgraded that, but there will always be something. So you can't say you're completely foolproof, because you won't be when you're creating basically a product as a service or a platform. And this is the kind of, I'm not going to tell you which I think is the light side and which is the dark side here, of like product development versus marketing. I came from marketing and now I'm in product development, so I don't know which way I've gone. But this is the thing where traditional marketing, you buy your TV campaign 2 months in advance to hit your A/B deadline, you plan it with a nice campaign planner. With agile development, you have literally you don't know what feature is going to be in the app in 3 weeks' time. So how do you work those two things together? How do you kind of, but then weirdly, one of the most effective forms of marketing we've done is Kids TV in the US for the app. Way more than universal app campaign with Google, because the kids who see the TV ad and are into Lego and like the look of this will go and download it. With a UAC campaign, it's more like you're just blowing out there to get as many downloads as you possibly can, and the relevance of those kids you're getting in is much less, so their retention is lower. So it's really like, we found it very difficult sometimes to marry up a more traditional marketing department with quite a progressive development department at the same time, and that's still kind of a work in progress, to be honest. And when we started this, we had this kind of safe agile process where we spent 2 months maturing a feature, and it had to be perfect before it went into the app and then went into the development process. And now what we're doing is putting features that aren't finished yet, and in some cases different on Android and Apple, so that we can actually test the results of that in both of those and putting it in. It's actually really simple to do, and people talk about A/B testing and they talk about agile, but actually all it really means is kind of doing stuff quickly that isn't quite finished yet and then seeing if it works. And that's what essentially we do. But you have to be open and ready for mistakes to be made and things to go wrong. And it's actually what we do is integrated the teams as well. So we have our creatives sit with the development teams and with the UX designers together in one sprint team. Whereas before we had it like as a complete linear flow where the creative guys go to UX, go to development. Now it's like they all sit together and debate, well, if you developed it this way, then actually it might not be quite as good. It might be 80% of what you want, but I can do it in 2 weeks. Versus exactly what you want is going to take me 2 months. So it works so much better that way. So I'm trying out some new transitions. And this is around kind of being data-led. Again, everyone talks about being data-led, but we found ourselves at the beginning, there would be like one big insight that we would find through some of the data that we are tracking in the app. And that would become a story that we would then use for different arguments or this kind of stuff. And it would be like 15% more kids come back if they've built a Lego minifigure of themselves in the app. So therefore we have to do everything around that. And it would be this kind of one point of data that they use for every single argument in the experience. But what we actually found was that was causing the wrong kind of data-led discussions. What was better when you actually get into the granular detail of, so when you upload a flow, 17% of kids drop out at this point, and then 10% drop out when you have to get the parent's email address, and then 5% out when they have to add a sticker, and then a further 30% drop out when they have to either keep it in their private collection or share it with other kids. So how can we take each one of those and improve it? Having already decided that we want to improve the photo upload show. So it's kind of sharing function. So it really is around taking it in a granular way rather than taking these big, bold, one piece of data, I'm going to use that to make my argument no matter really what I think. Obviously, you still need to go with your gut sometimes and be led with a vision. And that's this one, whereas if you're working in an agile way and you're working in a data-led way, you have to have something to aim towards. So recently we set our retention target at 10% DAU, which is the daily active users divided by monthly active users. Like Angry Birds in its first year was like 11%. So we're kind of trying to get somewhere close to that with a very different experience, but that was our benchmark. And we're about 7% at the moment. And I think that it's really important that, as my boss actually told me, you have to plant the beacon and then know when to move that beacon. Because agile development means that you're constantly changing. They need something to work towards, even if it isn't like in a waterfall where you'll have this one big thing, it's released now, it's a physical product or whatever. With agile, you have to have a beacon that you move, and it might be that it's moved more often. It can't be like the Greek myth of the guy with the grapes and you're trying to get the grapes in the water, you know, because that's just like painful. But it's like knowing exactly when is the right time to celebrate that achievement of reaching that, and then when is the right time to move it and plant it in the ground again. And that, as a leader, I think is one of the things that I've worked on the most in the last few years. And this is the thing where, you know, our chief marketing officer, Julia, she came into the business about 2 years ago. You know, I specifically asked her for permission to fail on certain things on this. And she was like, well, you know, YouTube for Kids has got 4 stars out of 5, so when are you going to get to that? And I was like, well, next year, but is it okay if we don't? And she was like, yeah, no. But we discussed it a lot around what should we be aiming for? And B was like, if you want us to do this properly, you need to kind of allow us to get things wrong a lot. And that senior management buy-in for failure is the most important thing you can get on this, because it's easy for them to say that, yeah, we embrace a culture of failure, and then it's like, right, we're shutting you down because you haven't reached 1 million kids. It's like they need to be able to put their money where their mouth is. And this is a term that my new boss told me, which I didn't know what it meant. And it means people physically together sharing some form of like friendship and personal relationship when they're working, when they're doing something difficult. So you get this sense of togetherness. I'm, you know, in the new world of working on Microsoft Teams and Skype and all that kind of stuff, I found that there was no substitute for getting everyone together. I got tricked into moving to Denmark by my old boss, basically. He was like, if you want to do this job, you have to move to Denmark and set it all up there. It's okay, you can commute. And I was like, all right, I'll take the job. And he was like, joking, you have to move there. So with my family and my kids, we all moved to Denmark. It's great. It's a lovely place to live. And we really enjoy it. But he was absolutely right. To do something like this kind of setting up a startup mentality in a large manufacturing organization, you have to have that sense of people and closeness and friendship and be able to be within Nerf gun distance of the developers so you can fire at them if they're not coding in front of their screen. It's a joke, we don't actually do that. But this feeling of called propinquity of everyone having that sense of togetherness, it's very difficult to do when you're working completely virtually. So that's one of the key things I took out of it. It kind of feels a bit old-fashioned, like you have to sit together to make it successful. But in this context, I genuinely believe it's one of the reasons why this is working better now than maybe some of our previous digital initiatives didn't. So it's going better now. So we have on average around 750,000 active users a month globally. And that's from about 3.5 million downloads. Obviously, we got a lot front-ended before the experience was really of good enough quality, but we're quite happy with that. This is the one that makes me the most happy, which is the 1.2 million uploads from kids. So these are creations that kids wouldn't have made if it wasn't for Lego Life. And we're getting close to our Chief Marketing Officer's goal of getting above 4 stars on Android and iOS. So, but that for me is like, we've proven that there is a need for something like this, or there is a desire for kids to share their creations, and now it's up to us to improve it and create this ecosystem around across mobile and web where they can share things in a much broader aspect, and that's what we're doing in 18 in terms of broadening it out. But we're pretty happy with where we've gone so far. And our retention is improving, so every month it's gone from 3 to 4 to 5 to 6 to 7%. We need to get to 10% by January to hit the beacon that I've set. If we don't, it's not a tragedy, but as long as it keeps going upwards, we can see the incremental improvements in what we're doing. That's the most important thing. And that's it. I feel like I've spoken a lot quite quickly, but I think I hit my time.
We'll forgive you because you gave us some Lego.